What if the monster was never the monster at all? You've been lied to. For centuries, the story has been told one way: Beowulf, the hero, slaying the mindless beast. A savage creature. A thing lurking in the shadows of hero, doomed by blood, damned by fate. But what if everything you thought you knew was wrong? What if Grendel wasn't just a monster, but something far more ancient, more intelligent, more terrifying? What if his rage wasn't mindless, but justified? Listen carefully. There's something rotten in the bones of this legend. A whisper buried beneath ink and time, a distortion so subtle that you never thought to question it. But the cracks are there, waiting for eyes sharp enough to see them. Start with the name, Grendel. A name older than the manuscript that binds him. A name that trembles with something wrong. No father. No origin. No tribe to claim him. He isn't just an outcast, he's an aberration. A thing that should not be. The scribes called him the kin of Cain, but Cain was merely the first exile, the first stain. Grendel is something else. Something other. Hero. A golden hall of feasting and triumph, drowning in its own songs of victory. And yet, night after night, something comes, something listens. A creature that does not sleep, that watches from the blackened fen, its hunger far deeper than flesh. The warriors laugh by firelight, drunk on their own myth, but they do not understand what waits beyond their walls. They do not hear the slow, deliberate breathing in the dark. Then the killings begin. Not clean, not swift. Bones crushed like dry leaves. Skulls split like rotting fruit. Not war, not battle, slaughter. Limbs wrenched from sockets, dragged into the night. The survivors speak of a demon, a shadow that moves like smoke, like thought. But they don't know the truth. They don't know that Grendel is not a simple beast, not a mindless brute. And neither does Beowulf. The so-called hero arrives, boasts of his strength, of his destiny. He does not see the trap closing around him. He does not wonder why Grendel never attacks in daylight, why he never kills the weak. He does not ask why the monster hates the sound of human joy. He does not question the one thing no one speaks of: what does Grendel remember? Because something made him. Something twisted the rules of this world and left him behind. And when Beowulf grips that monstrous arm, when he feels the bone and sinew rip free, he does not hear a beast's howl. He hears a curse breaking. You were never meant to read this. But now that you have, you'll never see Beowulf, or Grendel, the same way again. The night is endless. A thick, consuming blackness stretches over the land, pressing against the walls of Hero like a great, unseen force. Inside, the mead hall shudders with drunken laughter, the clash of wooden cups, the heavy thud of fists pounding tables. The air is thick with roasted meat, spilled ale, the sweat of warriors who believe themselves untouchable. But outside, something listens. A shape moves through the drowning silence, stepping lightly across the dead grass, its breath slow and steady. It is not in a hurry. It never is. It has all the time in the world because the hunt never ends. This is not vengeance. This is not hunger. This is something older, something deeper. It is the inevitable toll, the unspoken price for the arrogance of men. And tonight, someone will pay. The stories call him Grendel. A beast, a shadow, a creature cursed by God. A nightmare crawling from the wastelands, from the forgotten corners of a world that has no place for him. But Grendel does not care for names. Names are for men. Names are for those who belong. He does not belong. But he remembers. The stories, those brittle echoes passed down in trembling voices, tell of a hero, a champion of men, a warrior who arrives when all hope is lost. They say Beowulf's strength is beyond mortal measure. They say he fears nothing. They say he is destined to face the monster, to rip the life from its body, to cast it into the abyss from which it crawled. But stories lie. Because the truth is more terrifying than the myth. The truth does not comfort. The truth does not wear the face of a noble warrior standing against evil. The truth is this: Grendel is not the intruder. They are. They built their shining halls on the bones of something older than their songs, something that watched long before they learned to carve their names into wood and stone. They raised their golden roofs, filled their cups, roared their victories into the night, never once stopping to ask what else might be listening. And now, the reckoning has come. The first man barely has time to scream. The sound is wet, muffled, cut off as teeth sink into his throat, as hands like iron close around his chest and pull. Bone splinters, flesh tears, blood splashes against the floor in hot, pulsing waves. The others wake too late. Grendel moves through them like a storm-given form. He is not wild, not frenzied. Every kill is deliberate. Every death is an execution. He is not the mindless beast they tell stories about. He is something else. He is rage made flesh. And still, the stories will twist it. They will speak of a demon, a fiend, a thing that came crawling in the night to feast on the innocent. They will not speak of the years Grendel spent watching, of the nights he listened to their laughter, to their songs, to the sound of a world that has no place for him. They will not speak of what he felt. But it does not matter. Because the hero is coming. And with him, a battle that will shake the foundations of what men believe about monsters and what monsters believe about men. The fire is dying. The embers glow like the last breath of a wounded beast, throwing flickering shadows against the walls of the great hall. The air is thick, thick with sweat, with the scent of mead-soaked breath, with the unwashed bodies of men who have fought and bled for their honor. Somewhere, a hound shifts in its sleep, growling low in its throat. Outside, the wind howls, a restless spirit wailing through the thatched roofs of the village beyond. But no one listens. All eyes are fixed on the old man standing before the fire. His voice is not young, not strong, but it holds something greater than power, it holds time itself. He does not speak. He does not tell. He summons. He summons the past with every word, draws it from the earth, from the bones beneath their feet, from the very breath of the night. And they listen. For in this world of blood and iron, where a man's life is measured by the strength of his sword arm and the weight of his reputation, there is one thing stronger than steel: story. The Anglo Saxons do not write their stories in books. They carve them into stone, into the memory of those who hear. Their history does not sit silent on parchment, it roars in the voice of the scop, the bard, the keeper of their fate. This is not entertainment. This is survival. A man without a story is a man without a name. And a man without a name is already dead. So they listen. They listen to the story of men who crossed the sea in long, sleek ships, their prows biting through the black water like wolves in the night. Men who landed on foreign shores, claiming land with blade and blood. Men who tore down the ruins of those who came before, raising their own halls, carving their own gods into the wood. They listen to the old names: Wooden, Tuna, Tai, the gods who watch them from the sky, from the storm, from the battlefield. They are not gods of mercy. They are gods of war, of fate, of the great threads that bind every man to his death. They listen to the warnings, the whispered truths buried in the bones of their ancestors. They know that honor is a blade that cuts both ways. That every feast, every song, every night spent in the safety of the mead hall is borrowed time. That somewhere, beyond the light of the fire, the dark is always watching. Because the Anglo Saxons do not live in peace. They live in the shadow of what wants their peace. The raiders from across the sea. The monsters from the blackened woods. The curses that fester in the corners of the old world, waiting for men to grow too bold. So they do not forget. They cannot forget. The old man's voice grows rough, scraping like steel against bone. He speaks of warriors who stood alone against the tide of death. Of kings whose names will never fade. Of the beasts that rise when men grow weak, and the heroes who face them with nothing but their bare hands. And among these stories, there is one name that burns brighter than the rest. Beowulf. The name is heavy in their mouths, a name wrapped in blood, in legend, in something too great for flesh to hold. Beowulf, the man who faced the monster. Beowulf, who gripped death in his hands and did not flinch. But the old man does not say what the stories do not, that every hero is a heartbeat away from becoming a monster. That every monster was once something else. And that history is not written by the victors. It is spoken by those who remain. The ink is old. Older than kings, older than graves long since swallowed by the earth. It bleeds into the yellowed parchment like veins, twisting, whispering, aching with a story that refuses to die. The words are crude, hacked into the page by a hand that has been dead for centuries. Yet they breathe. They scream. Somewhere, in the dust of a forgotten scriptorium, a monk leans over his work, the candlelight flickering as if afraid. His fingers are stained black, the quill trembling in his grip, not from cold, nor exhaustion, but from something older, something deeper. He writes as though something watches. As though something waits. Who wrote Beowulf? No name clings to the parchment, no signature brands its creator. The poet is a ghost, a shadow in the margins of time. A man, or something more, who wove words together like iron links, forging a tale that would outlast stone, outlast kingdoms, outlast the men who ruled them. But what drove him? The wind howled outside the monastery walls. The world beyond was sharp, brutal, a place where monsters did not hide in the dark but walked freely under the sun, their faces familiar, their hands drenched in the blood of enemies, of kin. The monk had seen them, the warriors with their eyes hollow from too many deaths, their voices thick with tales of beasts and kings. He had heard the scop in the mead halls, their voices weaving past and present together in threads of terror and glory. He had seen the way men sat silent when the stories were told, because they were not stories at all. They were warnings. And so, in the flickering half-light, he wrote. The words took form, curling like smoke, biting like steel. The story of the Geatish warrior, the son of Ecgtheow, the man who walked into the lair of the beast and faced the dark with nothing but his hands. Beowulf. The name filled the page, heavy, inevitable. It was not his story. It was theirs. The men who lived by the sword, who knew that strength was the only currency worth spending, who understood that to be forgotten was worse than death. But the monk was not writing for them. He was writing for the silence that would follow. The silence after the battle, after the last sword fell, after the mead hall stood empty and the fire burned low. He was writing for the moment when the stories faded, when the last voice speaking them had withered into dust. Because that is what stories do. They fade. And Beowulf almost faded, too. For centuries, the manuscript lay hidden, passed from hand to hand, buried in the dark corners of libraries, forgotten by those who did not understand what it held. The ink cracked, the edges curled, the parchment grew frail as old skin. It waited, barely breathing, teetering on the edge of oblivion. Then the fire came. The heat blistered the air, a great inferno consuming shelves upon shelves of ancient knowledge. The flames roared like a beast denied its kill for too long, greedily devouring everything in its path. The Beowulf manuscript sat among the dying books, its fate balanced on the edge of disaster. Smoke curled around it like a strangling hand. Pages blackened. Edges curled inward like burning flesh. The words screamed, or perhaps that was just the silence before they were lost forever. But fate, cruel as it was, did not take it. Scarred, broken, trembling, Beowulf survived. Barely. And when the embers cooled, when the ashes settled and the library stood in ruins, someone, something, picked up what remained. A scholar. A man with ink on his hands and dust in his lungs, who knew that he was holding something that should not have lived. The words were weak. Some had vanished forever, stolen by the flames. The pages were wounded, pieces lost to time. But the heart was still there, still beating beneath the scars. Beowulf had not been defeated. And now, neither could the story. It crawled from the wreckage, clawed its way into the hands of those who would not let it die again. It was copied, studied, spoken aloud once more. It passed from tongue to tongue, from hand to hand, a warrior refusing to fall. 1,000 years had tried to kill it. Fire had tried to erase it. Silence had tried to bury it. But Beowulf does not die. It waits. The night is thick with silence. A silence that is not empty, but waiting. The fire in the mead hall gutters, throwing long shadows against the walls, twisting, stretching, shifting. Outside, the wind howls through the trees, but it is not the wind they are listening for. It is something else. Something moving just beyond the edge of sight, something breathing in the blackness, something hungry. A warrior grips his sword, his knuckles white. He does not move. He does not blink. Every muscle in his body is coiled, locked in the terrible stillness that only a man who has seen can understand. His comrades drink, their voices loud, their laughter reckless, but they do not know. Not like he does. They call them monsters, these things that stalk the night, but words are not enough. Words do not hold the weight of what waits in the dark. And then, a sound. A scrape. A breath. A shift in the air so slight it should mean nothing, but to the warrior, it is everything. He knows what it is. He has seen the tracks in the mud, the claw marks on doors ripped from their hinges, the bones left behind, gnawed clean. Grendel. It has always been Grendel. They say he comes from the fen, from the black waters that stink of rot and ancient things that should not be disturbed. They say he is a demon, the spawn of Cain, cursed to walk the earth as an exile, a shadow, an eater of men. But no words can truly capture what he is. He is the dark thing, the nightmare made flesh, the horror that does not whisper warnings but simply arrives. And when he does, the world breaks. But Grendel is not alone. He never was. The monsters of the Anglo Saxon world are not just creatures, they are truths. They are the things men fear but cannot name. They are death in its rawest form, the cold certainty that no sword is sharp enough, no wall high enough, no God merciful enough to stop what is coming. They are not villains in a story. They are the story. The truth men tell only in hushed voices when the fire burns low and their gods feel very, very far away. The dragon coils in its lair, its belly full of stolen gold, its eyes open in the dark, waiting for the thief who will seal his fate. It does not rage mindlessly. It remembers. It waits for the moment the world grows careless, for the moment man forgets that no treasure is truly his to own. And when that moment comes, when the fool dares to steal what should never have been touched, the sky will burn. The sea monsters rise from the black waves, their jaws wide, their hunger endless. They do not care for kings or honor or songs sung in the halls of men. They care only for the pull of the tide, the weight of flesh between their teeth, the silence of bodies sinking below the surface. And beyond them, something older still. The wolf, vast as the sky, its jaws stretched so wide they could swallow the sun. The serpent, called around the world, its venom seeping into the earth, waiting for the final battle, for the day when everything ends in blood and fire and shadow. These monsters were never just stories. The Anglo-Saxons knew them, felt them, feared them, because they understood something that the world has tried to forget. That the monsters were not lurking on the edge of the world. They were here. Always. The cold is alive. It slithers across the mead hall floor, wrapping around ankles, seeping into bones. The men do not speak. They listen. Not to the crackling fire, not to the wind battering the wooden walls, but to something beyond the walls. Something that waits. Beowulf stands. The weight of his sword is familiar, but there is something heavier pressing down on him, the knowing. The understanding that there are no heroes without monsters, that his name will only be worth remembering if he walks into the dark and does not falter. The hall stinks of sweat, of ale, of men too afraid to admit they are afraid. But fear does not belong to Beowulf. Outside, the swamp shifts. The mist curls and rides. And then, a sound. A groan of something ancient, something that does not belong in the world of men. Grendel is here. Beowulf does not pray. He does not beg the gods for favor. He is beyond gods, beyond omens, beyond the whispers of fate. He knows only this: there is a beast, and it must be slain. The door crashes open. The stench of the fen floods the hall, thick as rot, suffocating. And then, in the firelight, a shape too large, too wrong. A creature torn from nightmare, but this is no dream. The men are frozen, their hands useless on their weapons, their breaths shallow, as if the monster might notice them less if they do not inhale too deeply. But Beowulf moves. The beast is fast, but he is faster. He does not reach for his sword. He does not need steel. His hands are enough. He lunges, fingers curling around the slick, writhing arm of the thing that should not be. And then he pulls. The hall erupts into chaos. The screams of men, the howl of the monster, the splintering of wood as bodies crash against walls. But Beowulf does not let go. His grip is iron, his strength unnatural. Fate grips his shoulders, whispers against his ear. This is what he was made for. The sinews tear, the bone cracks, the flesh rips. And then, with a wet, sickening snap, the arm comes free. The beast wails, a sound that will haunt those who hear it until their dying day. It staggers, its lifeblood painting the floor, its body heaving with the agony of loss. And then it flees, dragging itself into the night, into the swamp, into the black water that will soon become its grave. The hall is silent. The men stare, their hands still gripping useless weapons, their eyes fixed on the warrior who did what steel and prayers could not. And in that silence, something is born. Something that will live long after these men are dust and bones. A legend. But legends are not built in a single night. There is another. A mother. She comes when the world sleeps, when even the bravest men have let their eyes close, believing that victory has been won. She is grief, she is rage, she is the raw, unrelenting force of vengeance given form. She does not crash through doors. She does not roar. She enters. Like death itself. Quiet. Inevitable. And in the morning, there is blood. Beowulf does not hesitate. The lair calls to him, a mouth in the earth that swallows light and dares him to step inside. He does. The water is black. It clutches at him, drags him down, but it cannot keep him. He belongs in places like this, where the air is thick with things that should not exist. She is waiting. The mother. She does not flinch when he rises from the depths, water dripping from his armor like molten silver. She is larger than her son. Stronger. And she does not fear him. The battle is different. There are no roaring men, no fire-lit walls. Only the two of them, locked in the place where monsters breed. His sword fails him. Its edge finds her flesh, but it does not cut. Fate holds its breath. And then, a blade. Not his. Another. Ancient. A weapon forged not by men, but by something older. He lifts it, feels the weight of history, of all the warriors who have failed before him. And then he swings. The mother's head rolls. The water swallows her blood. The world shudders. When he rises from the lake, when he steps back into the world of men, he is no longer just a warrior. He is something else now. Something larger. But fate is not done with him. Years pass. The gold piles high in his halls. The songs are sung, the feasts held. But peace is not meant for men like Beowulf. Peace is an illusion, a fragile thing that time shatters with cruel hands. And one day, the ground shakes. The dragon stirs. The beast is not like Grendel, not like his mother. It is not vengeance, it is not hunger. It is rage. And it does not come in the night, it does not wait in the shadows. It burns. The sky turns to fire. The earth cracks open. The people who once sang his name now scream for his aid. But Beowulf is old. He is not the man who ripped an arm from its socket, who dragged a sword from the depths of a cursed lake. He is slower now. Weaker. The weight of his legend is heavier than the sword in his hands. But he does not run. Because this is the way it must end. He stands before the beast, his body aching, his breath short. And when the fire comes, when the talons slash, when the world is filled with death, he does not retreat. The final blow is his. The dragon collapses. But so does Beowulf. The wound in his side is fatal. The men gather around, but they are not Beowulf. They do not know how to stop death. The gold glitters in the dying light. He does not look at it. Gold means nothing to the dead. He looks at his men, at the ones who remain. His breath is short. His words are few. He knows what comes next. The world will go on. The halls will fall. The songs will fade. And the monsters will return. Because they always do. And somewhere, in the silence between the stars, fate watches. Waiting. The night is alive with something wrong. The air is thick, swollen with a silence that hums just beneath the surface. The torches flicker, their flames licking at the darkness, but they do not chase it away. Something waits beyond the reach of the fire, something vast, something that hates. Grendel is coming. The mead hall trembles, not from wind, not from storm, but from the weight of his presence. He is not yet seen, but he is felt. The men shift in their seats, eyes darting to the door, to the walls, to the heavy wooden beams that will not hold when he decides to break them. Their hands grip their swords, but their fingers tremble. They know steel is useless against something like this. And then, a sound. A breath, ragged and too large. A dragging step through the wet earth, slow, patient, savoring the moment before the slaughter begins. The door does not open. It explodes. Grendel is hunger given form. His skin is thick, mottled with something not quite scales, not quite flesh. His eyes burn, but not with fire, with something colder, something ancient. He does not need weapons. His hands are ruin. His fingers end in claws that gleam, slick with the remnants of his last feast. And the men are nothing. He moves faster than anything so large should move. A man rises, sword raised, but Grendel swipes. The blade is gone. The arm is gone. The man's scream is cut short as teeth find his throat. Blood spatters the walls, steams against the firelight. Panic rips through the hall. They scramble, they pray, they run. But where? The doors are too far. The monster is everywhere. Another man is lifted, his legs kicking, his fists pounding uselessly against the nightmare that holds him. Grendel's maw yawns open. The bones crunch before the scream can even rise. And then he laughs. Not a sound of joy. Not a sound of mirth. A sound that curdles the air, that makes the fire shrink back. A sound that should never leave the throat of something that was never meant to exist. Because Grendel is not just a beast. He is a curse. He is the spawn of something that crawled from the black waters at the world's birth, something older than men, older than kings. His bloodline is soaked in sin. His mother birthed him in darkness, raised him in the filth of the fen, whispering to him of the hatred that bound them together. He has never known warmth. Never known love. He is the shadow cast by the world of men, the thing they fear but will not name. He has watched them from the swamps, seen their feasts, their songs, their laughter. He has listened to the clinking of goblets, the roar of men who believe themselves strong. He has hated them for it. And so, he feasts on them. But this is not hunger. This is not survival. This is something deeper, something more personal. They call him monster. But who made him this way? He was never welcome in their world. The first time he crept close, drawn by the sound of their joy, he had been chased. Hunted. The men had driven him back, their torches burning his skin, their jeers ringing in his ears. He had been born wrong, shaped by the sins of ancestors who had been cast out long before he took his first breath. He had learned, then. He had learned that he was nothing but other. And so, he would make them fear the dark as he had feared it. He would take from them what they had taken from him. Tonight is just another night. Another raid. Another slaughter. He rips through the hall, his claws painting the walls red, his teeth finding flesh. The men fall, one by one, as easily as a farmer fells wheat with a scythe. And when it is over, when the screaming stops and only the wet drip of blood remains, he stands in the silence and listens. The hall will be full again tomorrow. More men will come. More laughter. More songs. And he will return. Because he is not a beast to be slain in a single night. He is a curse. He is the darkness. The earth itself recoiled when Cain struck his brother down. Blood seeped into the soil, thick and hot, whispering to the heavens of a crime that could never be undone. The sky did not weep. The sun did not hide its face. There was no great storm, no trembling of the ground. Only silence. A silence that stretched, that grew, that pressed into Cain's chest until it became something else, something that followed him, sank into his skin, settled in his bones. He was marked. Not with fire, not with steel, but with something older than words. A brand that pulsed beneath his flesh, unseen but felt, a wound that would never heal. He walked from the presence of God, but he did not let him go untouched. He sent him into the dark, into the nameless lands beyond the world of men, where shadows stretched long and the air was thick with things forgotten. And there, Cain's bloodline twisted. Generations passed, but the stain never faded. The sons of Cain bore it in their marrow, carried it like a sickness that could not be cleansed. They lived in the places where light could not reach, in the swamps, in the caves, in the whispering woods that men dared not enter. They became something else. Something less than human. Or perhaps, something more. Grendel was born from that ancient curse, from the weight of a crime that did not die with its sinner. He was shaped by it, sculpted in exile, a creature of hunger and loneliness, raised by the silence that had first fallen over the world when Abel's breath had stopped. They say he was the spawn of monsters. That his mother was a hag, a creature of filth and fury, her eyes gleaming from the black waters where she made her home. But before she was a beast, she was cast out. Before she was feared, she was shunned. Before she was a mother, she was alone. And she passed that loneliness to her son. Grendel did not ask for this. He did not seek to be what he became. He felt the world of men before he ever set foot in it, felt their warmth, their joy, their laughter. And he knew he would never be one of them. They knew it too. They did not need to see his face to understand what he was. They could feel it in the marrow of their bones, in the way the air thickened when he was near. The mark was still there, passed down through time, still pulsing in the blood that ran through his monstrous veins. He carried Cain's crime in every step, every breath, every strike of his clawed hands. But Cain had not been slain for his sin. He had been cast away. And so too was Grendel. He did not belong in the mead halls, at the feasts, among the firelit songs of heroes. He was a thing made for the dark. A creature that should not walk where men walked, should not breathe the same air, should not exist. And yet, he did. He lingered at the edges of their world, watching, listening, wanting. But the mark does not fade. It does not allow mercy. When he moved from the shadows, they feared him. Not because he was great, not because he was terrible, but because they knew what he was. He was the past come alive, the exile made flesh, the cursed thing that was never meant to have a name. So he gave them something to fear. He became what they saw him as. A monster. They would not allow him to be anything else. The water does not ripple. It does not lap against the jagged shore, does not whisper with the soft murmur of wind and tide. It is still. Black as spilled ink, thick as old blood. The mere stretches out like a wound torn into the earth itself, a gash festering with things that should not be, things that never should have been. No man dares step too close. The air hums with something wrong, something ancient. The reeds shudder though there is no breeze, the roots of the trees twist as if trying to crawl away. And the water waits. It is said that nothing living stirs beneath that surface. That fish will not swim in it, that birds veer away mid-flight. The mere is dead. Or worse, it is alive in ways no man understands. This is where Grendel dwells. Not in a hall of gold and roaring feasts, not among the warmth of firelight and the company of kin. He belongs to the silent waters, the sunless world beneath the surface, the damp breath of the endless night. The fen stretches around him, swallowing light, swallowing sound. The ground squelches underfoot, thick with rot, with the remnants of things long lost. No road leads here, no path, no markers to guide the way. Those who find this place do so only once. They do not return. And beneath the mere, below the weight of black water and cold stone, something moves. The world above does not know this place. It does not want to. But it exists, just as Grendel exists. The halls of men have walls to keep the dark at bay, but the dark does not vanish simply because they refuse to see it. It lingers, it waits. The mere is more than a home. It is more than a place. It is an exile made real. It is the wound of Cain, still bleeding. It is the place where cursed things go to rot, where the forgotten sink and are never spoken of again. It is the other side of the world, the side where warmth does not reach, where laughter cannot echo, where names are meaningless because no one will ever call them again. The fen is hunger, unfulfilled. It is emptiness made flesh. And in its depths, Grendel listens. He hears the songs from the halls above, the voices that call to one another in the night. And though the water closes over him, though the blackness of his mere swallows everything whole, he is not deaf to the world that cast him out. The mere is still. But Grendel is not. The first scream always comes too late. By the time the man wakes, by the time his mind claws its way out of the haze of drink and dreams, it is already there. A shadow stretched long in the dim light of the dying embers, a hulking form that does not belong among men. The air thickens, turns to something damp and stifling, something that smells of old blood and the breath of the grave. Then comes the tearing. Flesh splitting, bone snapping, the wet rip of something too strong, too monstrous, too hungry to be stopped. The man thrashes, but there is no escape. He is lifted like a child's toy, his ribs crushed against a grip that is not human. The warmth spills from him, and his scream dies, his throat crushed before the sound can even finish forming. The others wake too late. The horror is already in the hall. Hero, mighty hero, the golden heart of Hrothgar's kingdom, has become a slaughterhouse. The wooden beams that once trembled with laughter now shudder beneath a weight they were never built to bear. The great iron-banded doors that once swung open to welcome warriors now stand useless, their purpose mocked by the thing that does not need doors to enter. Grendel is inside. And nothing will stop him from feeding. The men scramble for their weapons, but their hands are clumsy with sleep. Their minds are still tangled in the warmth of a world where they believed they were safe. They were wrong. The thing is already moving. Not walking. Not running. It does not need to. It is everywhere at once, a shadow that shifts and snaps, a force of rage and hunger wrapped in flesh that should not exist. The second scream ends in a gurgle. The third never has the chance to begin. Blood splashes across the stone floor, dark against the firelight. The warmth of it is wrong here. This is a place of feasts and stories, of triumph and celebration. But tonight, it is only death. Grendel does not kill like a man. He does not stab or cut or strike. He rends. He crushes. He tears limb from limb, feeds while the body still twitches, devours the life that once laughed and drank and called itself mighty. They called this place the greatest of halls. Now it is a tomb. The survivors flee into the night, their hearts hammering like war drums, their breath ragged with terror. They do not look back. They do not dare. Because they know. He is still watching. Grendel does not take them all. Not tonight. He leaves the hall still standing, but hollowed. Let them see the wreckage in the morning. Let them walk among the ruined bodies, let them hear the sobs of widows and brothers and sons. Let them feel the weight of their failure, the certainty that their gods have forsaken them. He will come again. Hero still stands, but it belongs to him now. Laughter drifts through the night, thick and golden, spilling from Hero's great hall like honey from a broken comb. It is warm. Alive. The sound of men who believe they are safe. Their voices rise in drunken joy, hands slamming goblets against wooden tables, mouths opened wide in song. The air is rich with roasting meat, thick with the heat of bodies pressed together in merriment. Outside, in the blackness beyond the fire's reach, something watches. He is there. Not fully seen, never truly heard, but there. His breath is slow and ragged, his massive frame coiled in the shadows where the human world ends. The wind slithers through the trees, but it does not touch him. He is not part of the living earth, not part of the warm, golden thing that glows beyond the stone walls. He is other. Grendel listens to the laughter, and something in him twists, black and sharp, coiling like a snake around his ribs. He does not know the shape of the feeling, but he knows it. He has always known it. It is an old wound, festering in a place beyond flesh. It does not bleed, but it burns. They do not know what it is to be him. They do not know what it means to walk alone in a world that spits at the sight of you. They have never felt the weight of the sky pressing down, never felt the cold inside their bones, a cold that does not come from wind or winter but from something deeper. The silence of isolation. Grendel knows it. It is the stillness of the mere, the breathless weight of dark waters that stretch beneath the earth, choked with weeds and things that should not be. It is the whisper of his own footsteps, unheard by any but the ghosts that curl around him like mist. It is the space where laughter does not reach, where no fire warms, where no voice calls his name. He watches the men inside Hero, their arms slung around each other's shoulders, their faces split wide with drunken smiles, and something inside him snaps. They were given everything. A world that loves them, that welcomes them, that sings for them. Their gods do not curse their existence. Their fathers do not cast them into the dark, naming them cursed, unclean, something to be forgotten. But Grendel? Grendel was never wanted. The moment he entered this world, it rejected him. His bloodline was poison, his name a stain. His mother, his only world, was already broken before she bore him, shattered by a curse older than words. She taught him silence. She taught him shadows. She taught him that the world of men was not his to walk in. And so he stayed in the mere. Watched from the edges. Listened to the laughter of the living while he sat in the cold, the filth, the blackness that had no end. He told himself he did not want their joy. But the lie never held. Because he did. Every night, when the men of Hero filled their cups and sang their songs, Grendel stood in the dark and listened. Every night, something inside him ached. Every night, something inside him hated. Not at first. At first, he only watched, only wondered, only felt the slow, gnawing hunger of something that had no name. But then came the rage, curling like a serpent, slithering up his spine. It grew each time he heard their joy, fed on the warmth of their songs, sharpened on the sound of their ease. And then, one night, it was too much. The laughter cracked something inside him. The music drove spikes into his skull. The warmth on their faces was mocking him. His mother told him to stay away. To accept his place. But Grendel was done being silent. The first time he stepped into the firelight, the men of Hero did not know what they were seeing. Their drunken eyes widened, their voices stumbled, their hands fumbled for weapons too late. Grendel saw them. And for the first time, they saw him too. He tore them apart before their minds could understand. Before they could truly look at him. And oh, how good it felt to hear them scream. Their joy had been a dagger in his ribs. Now, he was driving it back into them. They would know his name. They would fear his shadow. They would never laugh again. The body was still warm when Grendel's fingers closed around its throat. Blood dripped from the ruined chest, pooling thick and black on the mead hall's floor, soaking into the wood, the scent rising like an offering to something ancient and unspeakable. The others had fallen too quickly, ripped apart before their minds could wrap around what was happening. But this one had lingered, crawling, choking, begging. A mistake. Grendel dragged him close, the dying man's breath rattling in his throat, wet and weak. His eyes, wide with terror, locked onto Grendel's face, searching, pleading, failing to comprehend. His lips trembled, forming a word, but it never came. His chest shuddered, then stilled. The life inside him went out like a candle. Grendel had no use for words. He sank his teeth into the flesh. The first bite tore free with a wet, sickening snap, the sound of tendons stretching, breaking. Blood flooded his tongue, thick and metallic, hotter than the torches guttering along the walls. The warmth of it soaked his lips, dripped down his chin. He chewed slowly, deliberately, letting the meat roll over his tongue, letting the taste settle into the hollows of his hunger. It was always like this. The moment of silence after the slaughter, the bodies limp and broken, the taste of fear still clinging to their flesh. He ate because he was empty. A vast, endless hunger clawing at his insides, a gnawing black thing that could never be sated, no matter how much he consumed. They feared death, these men of hero. But they feared this more. To be devoured. To be reduced to nothing but meat, stripped of name and honor, their bones crushed, their flesh swallowed, their existence erased. They had feasted on beasts, hunted for sport, torn the skins from animals to clothe themselves. They had never imagined that one day they would be the one slaughtered, their bodies used to fill another creature's hunger. Grendel was no mindless beast. He knew what he was doing. He knew what it meant. This was not simply murder. This was consumption. Every bite was an act of vengeance. A way to make them feel, for even a moment, what it was to be powerless. To be prey. He ripped away another chunk, feeling the muscle tear beneath his teeth, the warmth of life still lingering in the marrow. The body in his grasp was nothing now, just a thing, just meat, just his. No one would sing for this man. No one would raise a stone in his name. They would burn what was left of him in the morning, and by nightfall, he would be forgotten. This was what they feared. The dark shape that waited beyond the firelight, the eyes that watched from the edges of their world, the mouth that swallowed them whole. The unknown. The thing that did not fit within their understanding, the thing that did not fear their gods or respect their rules. They could fight a beast. They could slay a monster. But what do you do when the monster eats you? The silence stretched, thick and unbroken. Blood dripped, steady as rain. Grendel swallowed, and the body in his grasp became nothing more than a memory. The hall breathed. The fire flickered low, shadows clawing at the walls, stretching, writhing. The air was thick with the stench of mead, sweat, and the lingering ghost of death. Warriors lay in restless sleep, hands still curled around the hilts of their swords, their dreams haunted by the beast that had come before. The beast that would come again. And then, a sound. Not the wind. Not the shifting of timber. Something heavier. Something alive. The great door groaned, wood trembling against the weight of something vast, something ancient. A clawed hand pressed against it, slow, deliberate. Then another. Then, silence. Beowulf was awake. He had been awake for hours, waiting, listening, his body taut as a bowstring. He did not reach for a sword. He did not call for his men. He lay still, heart steady, breath measured. He did not need steel to do what must be done. The door did not break, it exploded. Splinters flew, torches sputtered, men gasped awake just in time to see it. Grendel. Massive, twisted, a thing of nightmares and shadow. His breath rolled out in thick waves, carrying the stink of the grave, of torn flesh, of something that had never known light. His eyes burned, sweeping across the hall, searching, claiming. The hunger in his belly was nothing compared to the hunger in his bones. And then, movement. Not fear. Not retreat. A man rising to his feet, slow, steady. Beowulf. Grendel's lips curled, revealing jagged, wet teeth. Another fall. Another soft, breakable thing that thought it could stand. Beowulf did not reach for a weapon. Grendel moved first, an avalanche of muscle and rage, talons outstretched, jaws wide, ready to split this foolish man apart. And then, impact. Beowulf's hands closed around the monster's wrist. Flesh met flesh, and for the first time in all the long, blood-soaked years of his terror, Grendel felt resistance. He stopped. Not by choice. Not by will. He could not move. Beowulf's grip was iron, unyielding, crushing. A force he had never felt. A force that did not belong in the hands of men. Grendel snarled, twisted, lunged, but the warrior did not break. Did not stumble. Did not fear. No steel. No blade. Just strength. Grendel tried to wrench himself free, his muscles screaming, his bones straining. Beowulf tightened his grip. Tighter. Tighter. The beast let out a choked, strangled sound, a sound of realization. He was losing. Beowulf's grip shifted, twisting the beast's arm, dragging him down, forcing him into the floor, the stone cracking beneath their struggle. Panic. Grendel had never felt panic. He thrashed, slammed Beowulf against the walls, against the pillars, his claws raking at flesh, drawing blood, but the warrior held on. This was not a battle of swords. This was not a test of steel. This was a battle of will. And Beowulf's will was stronger. A sound tore from Grendel's throat, a sound no man had ever heard before. A sound no man was meant to hear. Not rage. Not triumph. A cry. Bone snapped. Tendons tore. Flesh gave way. And then, the arm came free. It did not slice. It did not sever cleanly like a blade through meat. It ripped. Torn muscle dangled, blood poured, the wound gaping, raw, obscene. Grendel staggered, shock flooding his body, the pain white-hot, blinding, unbearable. He could not comprehend it. This was not how men fought. Men screamed and ran. Men swung swords that did nothing. Men died. Beowulf had taken from him what no blade ever could. The hall was silent. And then, Grendel ran. Not a retreat. Not a battle lost. He fled. Stumbling, gasping, his own blood leaving a black trail behind him. He had never bled before. He had never lost before. Beowulf stood, chest heaving, the arm still in his grasp. The thing that had terrorized this hall, that had slaughtered men like cattle, had been undone, not by steel, not by magic, but by him. He did not call after the beast. He did not gloat. He simply let the moment hang. The proof of victory. The price of fear. The silence stretched, heavy, endless. And somewhere, deep in the darkness of the moors, Grendel screamed. The forest swallowed him whole. Grendel ran, the world around him blurred with pain, his own breath jagged and wet in his throat. Blood poured from the wound where his arm had been, thick and endless, leaving a black, glistening trail across the cold earth. The trees loomed, ancient and silent, watching his ruin with hollow, unblinking eyes. He had never known fear like this. Not when he first tore through the mead hall, feasting on flesh, drinking the marrow of men. Not when they swung their swords, their steel useless against his skin. Not when they screamed, their terror sweet and fleeting. But now, he was breaking. His body, once untouchable, once indomitable, had been torn apart. Not by a blade, not by the weapons of men, but by hands. Human hands. It made no sense. It defied the order of things. The pain was worse than anything he had ever inflicted. It called to him now, a whisper in the wind, a promise of cold, dark refuge. But he would not make it. His legs failed him. His body collapsed, massive and broken, into the mud. His breath hitched, his chest heaving, his life spilling into the earth. The night stretched, empty and vast. He thought of his mother. The only other being who had ever touched him, who had ever loved him, if such a thing was possible. Would she come for him? Would she see the ruin of him and wail as humans did for their dead? Or would she only rage? The water lapped at his side, cold as death. He had spent his life in the dark, lurking in the shadows, knowing only hunger, knowing only hatred. And now, a breath. A slow, shuddering breath. His body, once a weapon, was nothing now. His claws, which had torn through flesh, lay useless in the dirt. The strength that had made men tremble had drained from him. He was small. He had been reduced. And for the first time, Grendel knew what it was to be powerless. The water whispered his name. He let it take him. The water stirs. Something moves beneath the surface, slow, deliberate. Not like a beast, there is no wild thrashing, no mindless hunger. This is something else, something colder. It does not hunt for sport, does not kill for pleasure. It does not need to. She waits. The mere is silent now, thick with the weight of something unseen, something felt in the bones. The cave walls glisten, slick with centuries of moisture, the darkness so complete it devours the faintest flicker of light. The air is wet, thick, clinging to the skin like something alive. She waits. Her son is gone. She does not rage. She does not wail. She knows. She had felt the shift in the water, the unnatural stillness that should never have been. The mere had whispered it to her. Grendel is dead. There is no shock. Only certainty. A mother knows. The men think they have won. They sit in their halls, laughing, toasting, drowning their fear in drink. But the night is long, and their victory is a fragile thing. They do not know her. Her son was a monster, yes. A brute, a beast, a creature of hunger and mindless wrath. But she is something far worse. Grendel had terrorized for the sake of it, torn men apart because he could, because it was all he knew. His violence was a thing of chaos, of indulgence. But she waits. She thinks. She does not lash out blindly. She calculates. She moves like the tide, slow, inevitable. And now, she rises. The water does not resist her, it parts, welcomes her. Her form is massive, towering, but nothing about her is clumsy. She does not crash through the world like her son did. She does not stumble. She glides. When she reaches the surface, the night is waiting for her. It wraps around her, cloaks her, makes her one with the darkness. The men will pay. Not because she is hungry. Not because she enjoys the kill. But because they took her child. She will not let them forget. There is no screaming when she enters the hall. Not at first. The fire burns low, embers crackling softly, unaware of the shadow stretching across the stone floor. The warriors are asleep, their swords resting useless at their sides. They are dreaming of safety. Of warm beds and full bellies. They do not see her. Not until it is too late. Then, a single breath, sharp, ragged, the sound of a man realizing he is not alone. A rustle of movement, a shift of weight, then the first scream. It is not loud. Not yet. It is strangled, caught in the throat of the man she has lifted into the air with one massive hand. He flails, kicks, but she is unmoved. She watches him struggle, not with cruelty, not with pleasure. With purpose. She wants them to see. The others stir. Their eyes snap open. And then chaos. They scramble for weapons, for shields, but she is already moving, already retreating into the night, her prize clutched in her grasp. They will come for her. Of course, they will. Their pride will demand it. Their fear will demand it. And when they do, she will be waiting. The water does not welcome him. It seizes him. A grip colder than death, heavier than steel, wrapping around his body, pulling, dragging, swallowing him whole. The mere is not like the rivers of men, not like the ocean that bends to the wind. This water is wrong, thick as blood, ancient as nightmares. It does not flow, it devours. Beowulf sinks. There is no light here. No sun, no stars, no silver thread of moonlight piercing through. The world above is gone, severed, forgotten. The only thing that remains is the weight of the water crushing down, pressing against his armor, filling his ears with the slow, rhythmic pulse of something massive lurking below. He does not fight it. He let it pull him downward, let it drag him into the black abyss where no man should go. The silence is suffocating. But it does not last. A ripple. Then a shift in the darkness. Something is waiting for him. Shapes move in the water, things with too many limbs, too many eyes, too many mouths. Creatures older than time, born from the cracks of a forgotten world. They do not attack him. Not yet. They watch. They drift through the water like ghosts, their forms flickering in and out of sight, as if the mere itself is breathing them in and out. Then, a shadow. Not like the others. Bigger. Heavier. And then, pain. A clawed hand latches onto him, wrenching him sideways, twisting his body as if he weighs nothing. The force is monstrous, driving him deeper into the abyss, into the place where the Meerwitch waits. The lair reveals itself in flashes. A vast cavern of stone, ribs of the earth arching above, the walls slick with something that glows faintly, pulsing like the veins of a beast still alive. Bones litter the ground, human, beast, things that have never had names. The water shifts strangely here, thicker, heavier, clinging to his limbs like unseen hands. Then he sees her. Grendel was a monster. A brute. But his mother, she is something far worse. She does not snarl. She does not rush. She waits. The water coils around her like a living thing, parting only where she allows it. Her form is massive, towering, but there is no chaos in her movements. No blind rage. No hunger. Only intent. Her eyes gleam through the darkness, fixed on Beowulf with something colder than hate. Something ancient. Something patient. She has waited for him. And now, the mere belongs to her. The water surges around him like a living thing, thick and crushing, pressing against his ribs, against his skull, trying to drag the breath from his body. His limbs feel slow, heavy. He is a creature out of place here, drowning in her world, in her darkness. And she moves like she belongs to it. Grendel's mother does not charge blindly like her son. She does not roar, does not waste her strength in fury. She watches, circling, her massive form drifting through the water like a shadow cut loose. There is intelligence behind those eyes, something colder than rage, heavier than grief. She does not want vengeance. She wants his death. Then she strikes. A force slams into him, hard enough to send him reeling, armor groaning under the pressure. Her claws scrape, tearing at metal, at flesh, at him. He wrenches away, twisting, reaching for his sword, but the water betrays him, slowing his movements, turning strength into struggle. Another blow. She is faster. Stronger. His sword carves through the water, but when it finds her flesh, it stops short. A weapon made by men, built for the world above, feeble against the nightmare in front of him. The blade glances off her skin as if striking stone. She laughs. Not with sound, but with movement, the way she presses forward without fear, the way her claws reach for him again, closing around his throat, dragging him down, 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 cold stone against his back. He is pinned. The weight of her is crushing, her grip tightening around his throat. His vision darkens at the edges, and for the first time, he feels it, doubt. The thing no warrior speaks of. The thing that kills. His fingers scramble against the wet stone, against the bones of the forgotten, against the useless sword in his grip. His strength means nothing here. His weapons are worthless. This is her world. And she is winning. But then, light. Not fire, not the sun, but something older. A gleam, just beyond her monstrous form. A sword. Not his own. Not a weapon of men. It rests against the far wall, massive, ancient, waiting. Waiting for him. His vision is blurring, black spots eating the edges, but he moves. Not away from her. Not toward escape. Toward the blade. His fingers close around the hilt. Heavy. Too heavy. No mortal man should lift it. But he is no ordinary man. With the last of his breath, the last of his strength, he wrenches it free, feels the weight of it shift, feels the power buried in the steel. And he swings. The blade carves through the water as if through air, as if through time itself, and when it strikes her flesh, it does not stop. It sings. Grendel's mother does not scream. She does not have time to. The blade does not simply cut, it ends. It carries the wrath of something greater, something beyond men and monsters, something that does not forgive. The water shudders. And she is no more. The hall was silent, but the silence was wrong. It was thick, suffocating, like the air itself knew something terrible had come. The warriors stood frozen, hands gripping the hilts of their swords, breaths held tight in their chests. The torches burned low, their flames flickering as if they, too, were afraid. And then they saw it. Not a beast raging through the door, not a storm of claws and fangs like her son before her. No. She was calm. A shadow gliding through the threshold, slow, deliberate. A shape that did not belong among men. Grendel's mother did not roar. She did not need to. Her eyes burned, not with fury, but with something worse, understanding. She was not a mindless creature, not a brute lashing out in blind violence. She had watched. She had waited. She had chosen this moment. And now, she was here. A single warrior took a step forward, his voice trembling as he called for her to leave. She smiled. Then she moved. The men were strong, their steel sharp, but it did not matter. She was faster. Smarter. Their swords bit the air where she had been, but she was already behind them, already pressing a clawed hand to a man's throat, already ripping. A scream. Then gurgling. Then nothing. Blood splattered across the floor, across the faces of those who had sworn to never fear anything. But they feared her. Not just for what she was. Not just because she had killed. Because she knew. She did not strike for the sake of hunger. She did not attack for madness. She took vengeance. She knew what had been done to her son. She knew his pain, his torment, the way they had torn him apart with their steel and their war cries and their hate. And now she would answer. They called her a monster, but they did not understand. She was a mother. A mother grieving, a mother avenging. She could have killed them all. She did not. Instead, she reached down, her clawed fingers curling around the lifeless form of her chosen prize, the body of one who had played a part in her son's suffering. And then she turned. The warriors did not chase her. They could not. Because she had walked into their hall, past their swords, past their strength, past their bravery. And she had taken what she wanted. This was not a beast. This was something worse. This was a mind. A purpose. And they feared her for it. Just as they had always feared women like her. Circe, who turned men into beasts because she understood them better than they understood themselves. Medusa, whose gaze turned warriors to stone because she had once been their victim. The Morrigan, who wove death into battle with a smile on her lips. Men had always feared women who did not break. And Grendel's mother did not break. She took. She killed. She made them remember. And in the silence she left behind, the warriors stood with their swords still drawn, with their breath still caught in their lungs, with their hearts hammering inside their ribs. Because they knew she would come back. And this time, she would not leave without more blood. The blade was heavy in his hands, slick with the filth of the water, the sweat of his grip, the blood of the things he had already slain. It had not been his sword that would finish this. His was useless, his steel powerless against her skin, against the old magic that pulsed through her flesh like something ancient, something eternal. But this was different. This was a weapon that had been waiting. Waiting for this moment. Waiting for him. She was still. Not in defeat, not in surrender. Her body lay stretched across the floor of her own lair, but she did not look weak. Even in death, she loomed. Her limbs twisted into shadowed shapes, her hair fanned like black ink spilling into the water. Her eyes closed. But he did not trust them to stay that way. This was no ordinary kill. This was not a beast slain on the battlefield, not a thing that could be left behind, its corpse forgotten beneath the dirt. No. This was something greater. This was something men feared. A mother who had avenged her son. A woman who had stood against warriors and did not fall until fate itself had decreed it. She could not simply die. She had to be ended. The sword burned in his hands, an urgency thrumming through the blade, through the veins of the one who now held it. It did not feel like steel. It felt like judgment. Like a force older than him, older than the kings who sent him here, older than the gods themselves. And it wanted to sever. To cut. To make her powerless once and for all. His breath was loud in his own ears. His heart slammed against his ribs. He could feel her presence, even now, pressing against him, suffocating, warning. She was dead. She was dead. But her power was not. And so, with one last breath, he raised the sword. It did not cut. It tore. The flesh did not yield, it screamed. The blade passed through muscle and sinew and bone, but it was not a clean severance. It was war. It was a struggle even in her stillness, as though the very forces that had shaped the world did not want her undone. And then, release. The final snap of tendon, the last resistance broken. Her head was no longer hers. It was his. And yet, it was not victory that filled the space between his lungs. It was silence. Not relief. Not triumph. Something else. Something that called around him as he lifted the head from the ground, its weight shocking, as if it carried more than flesh, more than bone. As if it carried every story, every whispered fear, every warning that had ever been spoken of her. Her eyes were closed, but it did not matter. She was watching. Even now, with her lifeblood spilling into the water, with her body broken, with her vengeance severed from her hands, she was watching. And he knew why they feared her. Because she was not a mindless creature. Because she had fought with purpose. Because she had made them pay. Because they could kill her body, but they could not erase her presence. Unless they took her away. He turned, he stepped slow, the weight of her head heavier than it should have been. He moved through the water, through the silence, through the thick, pressing darkness of her lair. He moved with a single purpose. He would not leave her behind. He would bring her back. He would carry her severed head through the halls of men, through their torches, their whispers, their awe. Because her death was not enough. She had to be paraded. She had to be seen. She had to be made small. Even now, even as a lifeless thing in his hands, she wasn't. And they all knew it. The earth rumbled beneath his feet. Not the tremor of shifting stone, not the groan of a breaking hill, this was something else. A pulse. A heartbeat. A force so old it had forgotten time, so immense it could crush the weight of history beneath its coils. The cave exhaled heat, thick and blistering, curling from the cracks in the stone like the breath of something waiting. Beowulf tightened his grip on the sword, but he knew the steel in his hand meant nothing. Knew this would not be like the fights of his youth, where strength alone could decide victory. This was not a man. Not a monster. This was fire. The glow from the hoard flickered across the walls, turning the rock into molten gold. The treasure had been here for centuries, buried beneath the bones of those who had dared to steal it. But it was not the wealth that mattered. Not the shields, the rings, the rusting swords. It was the thing that guarded them. It moved in the darkness. Slowly. A shifting of scales, the scrape of claws against stone. The cave was vast, yet the presence inside it filled the space. A body so massive it could coil through the passages like a river of muscle and fire, a shadow so immense it could smother the light from the torches. Then, the sound. A breath, low, guttural, stretching through the cave like a promise of death. And then, the eyes. They snapped open, two burning wounds in the dark, sinking into Beowulf's skin before he even had time to move. They did not blink. They did not see in the way a man sees. They knew. The dragon did not ask why he had come. It did not need to. It had felt the theft, the greed that had disturbed its slumber, the hands that had dared to reach into its hoard. And now, all of them, would pay. The heat swelled. Not warmth. Not the heat of firelight or sun. This was the heat of something awakening. The kind that melts steel, that blackens bone, that leaves nothing but silence where men once stood. Beowulf did not flinch. The sword in his hands was old, but he was older. His body bore the weight of time, the scars of victories that had nearly broken him, the strength of a life spent standing between monsters and men. And yet, the dragon was older still. It unfurled itself from the shadows, slow, deliberate, its body uncoiling with the patience of something that did not fear battle, only ended it. The scales were not just armor, they were a fortress. Each one overlapped like iron plates, dull with age but unbreakable. Its limbs moved with the weight of mountains, the power of rivers that had carved valleys into the earth. And then, the mouth. It did not open quickly. There was no haste, no wild fury. The jaws unhinged with certainty, with purpose, and within them, fire. Not just flame. Not just heat. This was something that lived. It roared to life from the dragon's throat, rolling, twisting, building, a storm of molten destruction that would turn the cave into a furnace, that would consume Beowulf before he could lift his shield. And then, it came. A river of flame, roaring from the beast's mouth, licking across the stone, swallowing the space between them whole. Beowulf moved, the heat searing his arm as he raised his shield, his breath burning in his throat. The edges of the wooden frame blackened, splinters curling away from the force. But he stood. The flames died. Smoke swirled around him, clinging to his lungs, filling his mouth with the taste of charred earth. His shield was ruined. His sword, useless. Still, he stood. Because this was not about victory. This was not about glory. This was about facing it. Facing the thing that came for all men, the thing that no warrior, no king, no god could outrun. The dragon was not just a beast. Not just another enemy to slay. It was the end. And Beowulf was ready. The gold whispered. Not with words, not with sound, but with something older, something heavier. It had a weight beyond its gleam, a voice beyond its silence. It called from the darkness, from the depths of the earth, from the endless coils of the beast that owned it. A single coin had been taken. One. A speck of gold stolen from the mountain of wealth, an ember plucked from a roaring inferno. It should have been nothing. Should have meant nothing. But gold does not forgive. It does not forget. And neither did the dragon. It felt the loss. Not as men feel the absence of riches, not as thieves feel hunger or kings feel greed. It was not about wealth. Not about power. The hoard was its. A part of its body, its breath, its blood. And now, a wound had been made. Something stirred beneath the stone. A shift in the air, thick with heat and age, with the weight of something that had been waiting for too long. Then, movement. The mountain did not tremble, the walls did not shake. It was quieter than that. A slow, deliberate shifting of scales, the scrape of claws against treasure, the slide of something immense awakening. The gold gleamed beneath the beast's coils, a fortune beyond measure, yet it was not enough. No amount was ever enough. The treasure was a body, endless, consuming, insatiable. It had been gathered over centuries, stolen, plundered, hoarded in the shadows, but still, it hungered. Because gold was never just gold. It was power. It was possession. It was the weight of kings and empires, the lifeblood of nations, the promise of gods and the downfall of men. It had toppled thrones, started wars, set brother against brother. It was everything. And it belonged to the dragon. The fire-breathing beast had no need for it, no use for crowns or goblets, no thirst for wine from golden chalices. But it would never let it go. Because gold did not simply rest beneath the beast. It was bound to it. It was the reflection of its own endless hunger, the bottomless pit that could never be filled, the insatiable need that could never be satisfied. And so it lay there, watching, waiting, for the next thief, for the next fool who thought they could touch what could not be taken. And when they came, when their hands dared to close around a single piece, when their breath trembled in the heat of the cave, when their heartbeat pounded against the silence, the dragon would rise. And the horde would consume them. The fire moved before the beast did. A slow exhale, thick as oil, heavy with the promise of destruction. It rolled over the rocks, curling through the darkness, turning stone to ember before it ever touched flesh. The air burned. Not with heat alone, but with something older, something cruel. This was not the reckless fire of a torch, nor the desperate flames of men trying to keep the night at bay. This was the fire of something that had waited too long, something that had suffered the audacity of time and now demanded payment in ruin. Beowulf stood. The earth beneath him cracked, the heat blistering the soles of his feet through the iron of his armor. The weight of his sword was heavier than he remembered, his hand slower, his breath harder to steady. His body had carried him through war, through monsters, through kingship. And now, it carried him here. To the edge of the grave he had not yet dug. The dragon moved. Not a lunge, not an attack, just a shift, just a stretch of its enormous, ancient body, and the cave walls trembled. Coins clattered like whispers, unsettled by the shifting weight of their master. The beast unfurled, each movement deliberate, each motion betraying its patience, its understanding that this would be no hurried slaughter. It knew. It knew this man. Not by name. Not by deeds. Not by the weight of his past victories. No, the dragon knew Beowulf because it had known all who came before him. Men always came. They came young and full of hunger, greedy for gold that would never belong to them. They came strong and desperate for stories that would outlive them. They came old, like this one, tired, but unwilling to fade. Men did not fight dragons for wealth. Not truly. They fought them because they were afraid of being forgotten. Beowulf moved. He raised his sword, and it shook. A king's weapon, an old warrior's last blade. He had lifted heavier steel. Had struck harder, faster, with the strength of a younger man. But this fight was not about strength. This fight was about legacy. The first strike was not his. Fire swallowed the cavern whole, bursting forth in a roar that cracked the sky itself. It did not burn, it erased. Stone melted into rivers of molten rock, the very bones of the earth stripped bare by heat that had no mercy. He did not run. He should have. His men did. All but one. The young one. Wiglaf. But Beowulf did not look at him. He had no time to call out, no words left for teaching, no orders left to give. There was only the sound of his own breath, the rasp of his lungs against the thickening smoke, the pounding of blood in his ears as he charged. His sword met scale. A sound like thunder. The beast reared back, not in pain, not in fear, but in rage. It struck. Faster than a thing of that size had any right to move, faster than Beowulf could lift his shield. Teeth found flesh. Not the first time he had bled. Not the first wound to tear his skin, to break him open, to take. But it was the first he knew he would not walk away from. He felt the fire inside him before he felt the pain. But Wiglaf was screaming. Not in fear. Not in grief. In defiance. The boy, the warrior, his last warrior, attacked. The dragon's scream was something that did not belong to this world. Something ancient. Something furious. And Beowulf saw it. The moment. The single, fragile moment between life and death. The blade sank. The beast fell. And Beowulf was falling too. No, not falling. Not yet. He could still see. Not the dragon. Not the gold. The boy. His boy. The one who stayed. He tried to speak. He tasted blood. But the boy already knew. Knew what this meant. Knew what must come next. Beowulf did not fear death. He feared being forgotten. But Wiglaf would remember. And so the fire dimmed. The echoes of their footsteps had faded. Gone. Vanished into the darkness, swallowed by their own fear. Only the dragon remained. Only fire and smoke and the unbearable weight of death pressing against the cavern walls. And Wiglaf. He could still hear them, the ones who ran. Not their voices, not anymore. But their absence. The space they left behind, hollow and gaping like a wound torn open in the world itself. They were warriors. Sworn men. Oath-bearers, shield-holders. They had stood beside their king when the air was thick with feasting, when the golden mead flowed freely, when the songs of Beowulf's glory roared above the flickering hearth. But now, when the fire was real, when death bared its teeth, they had fled like frightened animals. Cowards. And Beowulf was dying. Wiglaf felt his breath claw at his throat, thick with smoke, thick with grief. He was young, too young. Not ready. Never ready. But it did not matter. His feet did not move backward. His grip on the sword did not loosen. His heart did not break, not yet. He stepped forward. The heat licked at his skin, searing, suffocating. He felt the weight of Beowulf's fate pressing against his chest, but he did not falter. Because he would not run. The dragon shifted. A thing too massive to comprehend, a shadow given breath, a nightmare of flesh and fire. Its body coiled around the treasure hoard, the spoils of forgotten kings, the remnants of 100 years of greed. Its eyes, molten gold, burning with something far worse than hunger, locked onto him. A boy. A fool. The last. And yet, Wiglaf did not lower his blade. The silence before the beast struck was heavier than the roar that followed. A strike meant to erase him. But Wiglaf moved. Faster than fear. Faster than doubt. His blade found flesh. Not the thickest scales, not the impenetrable armor of the beast's back, but a weak place, a wound Beowulf had already carved, a moment stolen from death itself. The dragon screamed. The cavern shook. Gold scattered. And Beowulf, the great king, the hero, the warrior of warriors, fell. Wiglaf's heart stopped. The world blurred. The fire, the dragon, the horde, it all became distant. There was only his king, his kin, the man who had given him a name worth carrying. Wiglaf ran to him. Fell to his knees beside him. Beowulf's breath rattled in his throat. His hand, heavy with blood, reached for Wiglaf, and the boy, no, the warrior, took it. No cries for mercy. No begging for life. Beowulf's eyes, still sharp, still filled with the storm of his spirit, burned into Wiglaf's own. And in that moment, Wiglaf knew. Knew that this was not just death. Not just the ending of a man. It was the end of an age. But not the end of the story. Because he was still here. And so long as he breathed, Beowulf would never be forgotten. The cold had crept into his bones. Not the chill of the wind, nor the damp weight of the grave-soaked earth. This was something older, something unseen. It whispered through the hollow spaces between words, between thoughts, between the final heartbeat of a dying king and the silence that followed. Beowulf stood at the edge of fate. Blood still dripped from his hands, his own, the dragon's, the lives already given to the gaping maw of history. He had always known it would end like this. No man could escape it. Not even him. Wyrd weaves as it must. But was it the will of the gods? Or the will of God? The old world clung to him, its weight pressing against his skin like the iron of his own mail. Odin's ravens had flown above his victories, watching, waiting, measuring the strength of his sword arm. He had sung the songs of his forefathers, had lifted his cup to the memory of warriors lost. But in the quiet, in the moments between battles, another voice had called to him. A voice that spoke of one God, not many. Of a world shaped not by the whims of the Norns, but by something greater, something beyond the reach of the fates themselves. Yet still, Wyrd had come for him. His limbs felt heavier now. The weight of years, of battles, of choices, of standing between the old and the new. The dragon's corpse still smoldered behind him, its death echoing into the earth like a tolling bell. He had struck it down, but at what cost? The fire had consumed him, but not before he had driven his blade into the beast's flesh, into the black heart of greed itself. His men had fled. All but one. Wiglaf knelt beside him, his young face twisted with grief, his hands clutching at a life already slipping away. Loyalty. Honor. The things that mattered, even now. Beowulf's breath came ragged. The ground beneath him blurred, shifting between two worlds, the world of kings and feasts and silver-bound shields, and the world that stretched beyond the reach of mortal hands. Had he won? Had he truly grasped victory? He had slain monsters. Had torn the arm from Grendel, had ripped the life from his mother's vengeful grasp, had bathed in the blood of things that lurked beyond the light of the hearth. He had ruled with strength, had given his people peace. But the dragon was different. It had not come from the dark swamps or the nameless horrors of the unknown. It had not crawled from the depths of nightmares. It had come from within. Not his. Not Beowulf's. But from men. Their greed. Their hunger. The gold that had called them, whispered to them, pulled them into the madness of wanting more. It had waited, patient, knowing that no kingdom could resist it forever. And when the hand reached for the treasure, when one man's desire outweighed the silence of wisdom, the dragon had risen. Beowulf had slain it. But the fire had already burned too long. His fingers tightened around Wiglaf's. Is this where the path ends? Was this fate, the old way, the great tapestry of the Norns, spinning without care? Or was it the will of the Almighty, the judgment of a higher force, the same one that had pulled the sea apart for Moses, that had struck the Philistines low, that had raised the humble to greatness and cast the mighty down? He had walked both paths. He had held the old gods close, had trusted in steel and strength, in the knowledge that Wyrd would turn as it would, that nothing could shift what had already been spun. But he had also listened to the whispers of priests, to the stories of a god who did not weave fate, but shaped it. And now, lying on the cold ground, Beowulf did not know which had brought him here. Perhaps it did not matter. Perhaps there was no difference. The sky above him stretched wide, endless, dark and waiting. His breath shallowed. Wiglaf's grip tightened. The old world was slipping away. And Beowulf, warrior, king, legend, slipped with it. The hall was silent, but the walls still remembered. They had been witness to it all. The roaring laughter of warriors swollen with mead, the clash of iron, the spilling of blood. The screams. The scent of death that never truly left the timber, no matter how many years passed. Grendel had come in the dark, his massive form slipping through the cold night, drawn by the sound of feasting, by the warmth he could never touch. He had watched them, these men of the hall, revel in their triumphs, their songs, their victories, as though the world belonged to them alone. Did they know? Did they understand what they were to him? Or had they only seen the monster? Beowulf had come to end it. He had watched as men trembled at the mere whisper of Grendel's name, had listened as they spoke of the beast that stalked their knights. The monster that tore through their walls, dragged their brothers into the dark, left only blood and broken bodies in his wake. But as he gripped Grendel's arm, as flesh met flesh in a struggle that shook the very bones of the earth, had he seen something else? Had he seen the pain beneath the rage, the curse woven into Grendel's very being? A creature born of Cain, cast from the light, condemned before he even took his first breath. Monsters did not choose to be monsters. And yet, Beowulf tore him apart. The sinew ripped. The bone cracked. The mighty Grendel, who had once been unstoppable, who had been the thing whispered of in fear, the nightmare that walked, fell to his knees. He had only wanted the warmth of the hall. The warmth of something he would never have. The hall was silent, but it would never forget. And neither would Beowulf. Because he, too, had felt it. The way the men looked at him, the way they whispered after the feasting was done. Their voices hushed, as though afraid to say it aloud. How strong he is. How unnatural. How much like? But no. He was their hero. Their king. Their slayer of monsters. Wasn't he? The sword had swung again and again. He had buried it in the bodies of beasts, had cut down Grendel's mother in her own home, had faced horrors beyond words. And yet, when he stood before the dragon, when he felt the fire licking at his flesh, had he known? Had he understood? That monsters were not always born. Sometimes, they were made. By the weight of expectation. By the blood on their hands. By the silence of a hall that would remember the man, but never truly mourn the monster. The hall was closed to him. Grendel stood at the edge of the moors, watching the golden light spill through the cracks in the great wooden doors. He listened to the voices, laughing, boasting, fearless in their numbers. The sound twisted in his ears, unfamiliar, something not meant for him. He was not welcome there. The wind howled across the marshlands, rattling the reeds, stirring the filth where he had made his home. It clung to his skin, thick and wet, reminding him of what he was. What they believed him to be. A beast. A curse. A thing unfit for their world. He had not chosen to be born of Cain, to carry the weight of ancient sins on his shoulders. He had not asked to be cast out, to be feared, to be hated before he had even set foot in their lands. And yet, the moment they had laid eyes upon him, the moment his shadow stretched too far into their world, they had decided. He was the other. And the other must be destroyed. The laughter within the hall turned to song, a celebration of strength, of men who fought side by side, who spilled blood together, who belonged to each other. They would not have sung for him. He felt it rise in his chest, a slow, burning ache. The kind that does not roar but festers, growing heavier with each night he spent in the dark, listening to their joy, knowing he would never taste it. He stepped forward. The earth swallowed the sound of his footfall. They would not hear him coming. They never did. But they would hear the screams. The shield shattered beneath the blow. The warrior staggered, his breath torn from his chest, his body screaming for relief. But there was none. The air was thick with the scent of blood, of sweat, of iron, and fear. The clash of swords rang out like thunder, and still, he stood. A true warrior does not kneel. His fingers tightened around the hilt of his blade, slick with blood, his own, his enemies'. It no longer mattered. Honor demanded he fight. Death would come for him when it willed, and he would greet it standing. Cowards did not sing in the halls of kings. Their names did not linger on the tongues of bards. He roared and struck forward, his sword carving through the night. The mead hall was silent. The battle was done, the men drained of their fury, their hands still trembling from the clash of steel. Blood had been spilled, honor preserved. But now, in the hush that followed, all eyes turned toward her. Wealhtheow stepped forward, the weight of a queen heavy upon her shoulders, though she bore it as if it were silk. The torches flickered against the gold at her throat, casting shadows that whispered of something unspoken. She did not wield a sword, yet her presence commanded the room as if she held a blade to every throat. She poured the mead with hands that did not shake. She moved between warriors who had slain beasts, men who had stood against death itself, and yet they lowered their gazes in her presence. Power did not always roar. Sometimes, it flowed like the steady hand of a woman who knew that a kingdom could be held together not by bloodshed, but by words, by diplomacy, by the soft force of wisdom. But there were others. In the darkness beyond the fire's glow, another woman lurked. Not bound by gold, nor wrapped in silks, but draped in the howling agony of vengeance. Grendel's mother, rage, grief, and fury given form. She did not serve mead, she spilled blood. She did not bind men with loyalty, she ripped them apart limb from limb. A queen of her own kind, a ruler of shadows and sorrow, born of the same force that made Wealhtheow strong, but twisted into something monstrous. What made them different? One upheld the world of men, whispering peace into the ears of warriors, reminding them of duty, of restraint, of the thin thread that separated order from chaos. The other tore at that thread with clawed hands, dragging warriors into the abyss, a warning of what lay beyond civility, beyond control. And in between them, a silence. A space where steel and silk touched, where the line between noblewoman and monster blurred. Where power was neither good nor evil, it simply was. The monster watches. The hall is warm, pulsing with laughter, the clinking of cups, the crackling of the fire as it licks the meat on the spit. Shadows sway against the walls, figures larger than life, warriors draped in gold, in power, in the easy arrogance of men who have never been forced to live beneath the world they rule. Outside, beneath the weight of night, Grendel stands. Cold gnaws at his skin, the wind slicing like tiny daggers through the gaps in his thick hide. The scent of roasted flesh reaches him, the scent of men, of sweat, of victory. His claws dig into the frozen earth. He was never invited. John Gardner gives him a voice. A mind that twists and turns, thoughts that burn like a slow-growing fire in the pit of his skull. No longer a mindless beast, but something far worse, something that knows. He understands the world that hates him. He sees the beauty of it, the cruel symmetry, the way the strong sing songs of their own glory while the forgotten watch from the dark. He listens to the shaper, hears the lies spun into legend, the stories that paint him as the evil thing, the lurking horror, the shadow on the edge of greatness. But he knows better. He has seen men rip each other apart for power. He has seen their cruelty, their hunger for war. And yet, they call him the monster. A different kind of horror takes root when the beast is not an unknowable nightmare, but something that thinks, something that feels. Something that watches the light and knows it will never belong. Other voices echo the same story in different tongues. Movies cast him in flickering frames, twisted and grotesque, the nightmare that crawls into the hall to feast on flesh. But sometimes, the eyes are too human. The pain too raw. The audience shifts uncomfortably. They were supposed to fear him, weren't they? They were supposed to root for the hero, for Beowulf, for the slayer of the beast. But what if the beast was only hungry? What if it only wanted to be seen? The warmth of the hall never reaches him. The songs will never sing his name. The door will always be closed. And so he waits, outside, in the cold, until hunger becomes rage. The hall is silent. Not the warm silence of comfort, but the kind that presses against the skin, crawling into the chest, squeezing the breath tight. The warriors do not sleep easily. The walls are thick, the fire still glows, but something lingers just beyond the door. Something massive. Something breathing. A nightmare with claws. Beowulf waits, his grip firm around the hilt of his sword, his body tense like a coiled spring. He knows what comes for them. He has seen it before, not just with his eyes, but in the unspoken fears of men who speak of monsters like they are only shadows. But shadows do not break bone. Shadows do not hunger. Grendel is coming. And what is Grendel, if not fear itself? Fear that watches from the dark, fear that waits for the right moment to sink its teeth into the flesh of the living. He is the thing that reminds them how fragile they are, how quickly the warmth of the hall can turn cold. He is the fear of the unknown, the fear of the outsider, the fear that no matter how high they build their walls, something will always be waiting outside. But Grendel is not the only monster. The sea boils with the rage of his mother, an anger so consuming it drowns reason, an endless, churning fury that pulls men down, down, down into the abyss where no songs will ever reach them. She is not mindless. She is not chaos without cause. She is a mother who has lost her son. And what is grief, if not rage given breath? There is something more terrifying than the beast that kills without reason. It is the one that remembers. The one that mourns. And then, there is the dragon. It does not watch from the shadows. It does not hunt in the dark. It waits. Time is nothing to it. Decades pass, men live and die, and the dragon sleeps, called around its hoard, the embodiment of greed, of power, of the hunger that never ends. It does not need to strike first, only to be provoked. And when it wakes, the sky burns. Monsters do not come from nowhere. They are born from the cracks in men's hearts, from their fears, their desires, their unspoken rage. They are what men become when they are pushed too far, when they stop caring for the walls and the fire and the songs. Beowulf does not just fight them. He fights what they mean. But in the end, he too becomes the thing in the dark. He too is feared. He too stands alone, waiting for the inevitable, knowing that even the greatest of men can become something monstrous in the end. And when the dragon comes, the hall will be silent once more. The wind howls through the night, a voice older than kings, older than stone, older than the stories men tell to keep their courage alive. It carries the scent of blood, of iron, of something ancient stirring beneath the earth. The hall stands firm, golden light flickering against the thick walls, but outside is where warriors are made. Where legends are forged. Beowulf stands at the edge of the world, staring into the abyss of fate itself. He has heard the stories, the old gods who walked before him, Odin, one-eyed and wise, whispering secrets of war and death, Thor, hammer in hand, the sky roaring with his fury. Their echoes thunder through his bones, their legacy etched into every scar that lines his body. He was not born among them, but he is them. The same blood courses through his veins, the same fire drives his will. He knows what it means to fight, not just for glory, not just for survival, but because it is written in the bones of men like him. The way of the warrior. He has never seen Valhalla, but he knows its promise. He has never spoken to Odin, but he understands the price of wisdom. There is no hesitation in his step, no fear in his heart as he walks toward the thing that waits in the dark. The warrior ethos is not spoken, it is lived. It is the grip of a sword handle slick with sweat, the sharp crack of a shield meeting steel, the taste of battle in the back of the throat. It is the understanding that death is not the end but the beginning of something greater. It is the acceptance that to live as a warrior is to walk willingly into the storm. And the storm always comes. Like Thor against Jormungandr, Beowulf does not fight small battles. His enemies are creatures of chaos, forces that should not be tamed, but he stands before them anyway, unyielding. Like Odin hanging from Yggdrasil, he seeks something beyond mere victory, he seeks meaning in the struggle itself. The old gods watch from the stars, their laughter rolling like distant thunder. They see him, a mortal bound by flesh but unshaken in spirit. He does not pray to them. He does not beg for their favor. He simply is. And that is enough. The wind howls again, carrying with it the promise of battle. Beowulf breathes it in, feeling the weight of centuries behind him, knowing that men will speak his name long after his bones have turned to dust. Because the gods may have shaped the world, but it is warriors who carve their names into its heart. The sword should have cut through flesh. It should have torn muscle from bone, should have split the beast's hide like brittle bark. But it didn't. It stopped, halted by something unseen, something ancient, something that did not belong to the world of men. Beowulf's grip tightened, fury curling through his fingers as he wrenched the blade free. The cavern pulsed around him, a place where no mortal belonged. The water did not ripple as it should, it listened. The air did not stir, it watched. Shadows slithered along the walls, whispering secrets in a tongue older than any kingdom. The monster moved, and the sword, his trusted weapon, forged by human hands, blessed by human skill, failed him. Because human strength has limits. He knew this, even as his heart raged against it. No matter how strong the arm, how fearless the warrior, there were forces that would not yield. Things that did not bow to mortal will. Beasts that did not bleed like men. A curse. A spell. A power older than iron, mocking him, defying him. And then, another blade, waiting in the darkness. A thing not shaped by human hands but by something far greater. Its edge gleamed with an unnatural light, and the moment Beowulf touched it, he felt the difference. This was no mere weapon. This was an instrument of fate, of vengeance, of gods who once walked the earth and left their wrath buried in steel. With a single strike, the world shifted. The monster fell. The blood ran black, thick as oil, tainted by sorcery that had once made it invincible. And the sword, that sword, burned away, as if the gods had only allowed its existence for this moment, this purpose. Because magic does not obey men. It bends when it chooses. It grants favor when it wills. It is the whisper in the dark, the weight in the air before a storm. It is the thing that waits beyond the grasp of warriors, of kings, of those who think strength alone can shape destiny. Beowulf does not ask for magic. He does not plead with gods. But they watch him all the same. And sometimes, just sometimes, they answer. The ground trembles first. Not a quake, not a shudder, a warning. Something massive shifts beneath the surface, something ancient stirring from its slumber. The weight of its existence bends the air, thickens the silence. A low, guttural sound follows, a breath too large, too monstrous to belong to anything mortal. Then the water swells. Not waves. Not ripples. A slow, deliberate rising. A presence unfurling from the abyss, dragging itself upward, defying the boundaries of sea and land. It is not just coming, it is returning. Jormungandr, the Midgard serpent. The beast that stretches around the world, biting its own tail, waiting for the day when it will release its grip and drown the gods in venom. A force of inevitability. A creature that must exist because the end must come. Grendel moves through the darkness the same way. Not a beast, not a man, but something else. A nightmare made flesh. A hunger that cannot be named. He walks on the edges of men's fires, his presence warping the night. He is not just a monster, he is the thing that waits outside every door, pressing against the thin walls of comfort, of safety. He does not rage blindly. He knows what he does. He listens to their joy, their laughter, their feasts, and he hates it. Fenrir, the great wolf, knows hate too. Bound in chains forged by gods who fear him, he waits for his moment. They laugh at him, trick him, treat him as if he is nothing more than a beast to be tamed. But he knows the truth. He is fate itself. And when his jaws finally break free, they will crush everything. Monsters in myths are never just creatures. They are not simple, mindless things to be slain. They are punishment. They are vengeance. They are the weight of the world pressing down on those who dare to think they are safe. Beowulf's monsters, the Norse horrors, the medieval terrors that haunted Europe, they all come from the same whisper in the human mind. What waits for me in the dark? Grendel's mother, rising from her lair, her grief spilling into rage. A mother stripped of her child, an avenger who does not ask for justice, she takes it. And what is she, if not the same force that sent the Erinyes after murderers, the same wrath that turned Medusa's gaze into stone, the same unstoppable fury that makes gods tremble? She is not a woman. She is not a beast. She is the unrelenting, merciless cost of bloodshed. And then there is the dragon. Not a hoarder. Not a mindless thing curled around its gold. A force of destruction waiting to be provoked. The moment the thief's hand closes around a single cup, the dragon knows. There is no hesitation. No bargaining. No mercy. Only fire. Only death. Only the weight of centuries, of power too vast, too consuming to be bound by mortal understanding. The dragon in Beowulf is no different from Fafnir, the beast who once was a man, poisoned by greed, turned monstrous by desire. No different from the dragons of Europe, whose very breath meant death, whose wings cast shadows over entire kingdoms. They are not obstacles. They are warnings. You cannot take from them. You cannot steal and survive. Yet men try. Because men always try. And in the end, the monsters always return. The fire had long since died, but the shadows still moved. They clung to the walls, shifting, twisting, breathing. The old hall stood empty, the echoes of battle lost to time. Yet something remained, the presence. The weight of words, of stories older than memory itself, pressed into the cold stone. Beowulf's voice was silent, but his legacy pulsed beneath the surface, waiting. J.R. Tolkien sat alone, staring into the flickering candlelight, his fingers tracing the brittle edges of an ancient manuscript. The words of Beowulf reached across centuries, whispering their secrets. It was not just a tale. Not just a poem. It was a song of blood and sorrow, of fate winding its cruel hands through the lives of men who dared to stand against monsters. It called to him. He felt the weight of the mead hall, of heroes' doomed revelry, of Grendel's silent approach in the dead of night. He saw the dragon coiled in the darkness, its rage simmering beneath golden hordes. He heard the clash of swords, the cries of men who knew they would not return home. And then, he created. The riders of Rohan were born in the echo of that hall. Their words, their names, their songs carried the rhythm of Old English, their banners rising like golden wheat in a land that could have been torn from the pages of Beowulf itself. Their king, the Odin, stood where so many before him had stood, against the tide of fate, against an enemy too vast, too inevitable. And like Beowulf, he rode toward death, not in fear, but in defiance. There was something ancient in the bones of Middle-earth, something older than the story itself. The weight of Wyrd, the Anglo Saxon belief in an unyielding fate, wove itself through the choices of men and kings. Boromir fell, as all warriors must. Aragorn carried the burden of lost kingship, his destiny written in blood long before he was born. And Frodo walked the edge of ruin, bearing a curse as heavy as any sword, as damning as any dragon's fire. Tolkien knew what the old poets knew. Monsters were never just beasts. Grendel was not merely a creature, he was the darkness that hated the light. The dragon was not just a serpent, it was greed given form, the rage of time itself burning all who dared to outlive their worth. Sauron's eye burned with the same consuming hunger, its gaze stretching across lands, across lives, devouring all it touched. The sword that Beowulf raised against the beast, the sword that shattered in his final hour, lived again in Andriel, reforged from the shards of a broken past. The hall of Meduseld, gleaming gold, carried the whispers of heroes' doomed glory. Even the barrows, the silent graves of forgotten kings, breathed with the ghosts of Anglo-Saxon lore, their cold hands reaching forward, grasping, remembering. Beowulf had not died. His story had only changed its name. And still, the shadows moved. The air was thick with the scent of blood and dust. A beast lay broken at his feet, its blackened heart still shuddering in its ruined chest. The hero stood above it, his sword trembling in his hand, his breath ragged, his limbs heavy with the weight of the battle. And yet, as the thing died, its monstrous body twisting in agony, its voice slithered through the darkness, whispering words he had heard before. There will always be another. The hero knew. He had always known. From the first man who raised his fists against the unknown to the warrior who fell upon his own blade to protect what little light remained, this war had no end. It was written into the bones of the world, scrawled across the heavens in ink made of sweat and sorrow. Gilgamesh had walked the scorched sands of Uruk, his heart hardened by the grief of losing his only friend. He had fought monsters, yes, but the greatest monster was the silence that followed Enkidu's last breath. He could slay giants, rend beasts limb from limb, but he could not defeat death. And so he raged against it, chasing eternity into the black abyss of the unknown, searching for a way to steal what had been stolen from him. The hero never changes. Beowulf stood in Hero's golden light, knowing the dark things that lurked beyond its doors. He had crushed Grendel's bones, had torn the demon's arm from its wretched body, but what had he truly slain? The hunger of the outcast? The rage of those forever cast into the cold? The hero fights, but the monster always returns. It crawls from the edges of the story, its shape shifting with the centuries. The Hydra, its heads multiplying with every strike. The dragon, its horde growing with every life consumed. The serpent, coiling in the shadows of men's hearts, whispering that nothing is ever enough. And the hero, he rises, again and again, his face different but his purpose the same. He is Arthur, drawing steel from stone, knowing that destiny is both gift and curse. He is Siegfried, bathing in the blood of a dying beast, thinking himself invincible, unaware of the single weakness left untouched. He is Samson, shattering pillars with his final breath, knowing the only way to win is to bring everything crashing down. But heroes are never just warriors. They are the ones who hold the line when all others flee. They are the ones who burn, just to cast one final flicker of light into the abyss. They wear capes now, their armor woven from cloth instead of steel, their weapons forged from ideals instead of iron. Superman hovers above a dying world, a god among mortals, and yet still bound to the weight of their suffering. He could rule them. He could shape the world in his image. But he doesn't. Because that is what monsters do. Batman stalks the streets of Gotham, a city drowning in its own sickness. He could give in. He could become the very thing he fights. But he doesn't. Because that is what monsters do. The battle is eternal. The hero, the monster, two halves of the same story, forever locked in struggle. One cannot exist without the other. Without darkness, the hero has nothing to fight. Without the hero, the darkness swallows everything. Somewhere, a new beast is rising from the depths. Somewhere, a sword is being lifted. The war begins again. The mead hall was silent. The air, thick with the ghosts of old battles, pressed against the wooden beams, listening. Outside, the night was endless. A monster stirred in the darkness, its hunger older than the stones beneath its feet. And inside, men waited, their hands tightening around the hilts of their swords, knowing that before the dawn, something would break the silence. Beowulf stands at the center of English literature like a warrior at the mouth of a cave, staring into the black unknown. The tale is carved into the bones of history, whispered through generations, echoing through time with the weight of something that refuses to die. It was never just a poem. It was a call to arms, a promise that some battles must be fought even when victory is impossible. Every word pulses with blood and fate. The lines are harsh, heavy as iron, built from a language that does not sing but roars. It was never meant for quiet voices. It was meant to be shouted across halls thick with the scent of ale and sweat, meant to make men's hearts pound like war drums, meant to remind them that monsters are real, but so are those who dare to fight them. And it was not forgotten. It could never be. The ripples of Beowulf crashed against the shores of time, spilling into the veins of medieval literature. Without him, there would be no Arthur standing in the shattered ruins of Camelot, no Gawain riding toward the green chapel with death whispering in his ear. Without him, the epics of old would be hollow things, missing the weight of duty, the sharp edge of sacrifice. The poets who came after did not simply remember Beowulf, they carried his fire, let it burn in the sagas of knights and kings, in the doomed love of Tristan and Isolde, in the quiet sorrow of nameless warriors who faded into the pages of history. His voice is there, between the lines, in the rhythm of old verses, in the weight of every tale where a man faces the darkness and does not turn away. And still, he stands. The poem survived the centuries not as an artifact, not as a relic, but as a warning. There will always be monsters. There will always be something lurking at the edges of the firelight. And there will always be those who rise, blade in hand, ready to face the night. The fire licked hungrily at the edges of the manuscript, smoke curling like ghostly fingers through the dim chamber. Shells groaned under the weight of centuries, parchment whispering its last words before crumbling into nothing. The Ashburnham house fire of 1731 did not care for history. It did not care for poetry. It did not care that inside those flames, something ancient was being erased, something that had already spent too many years teetering on the brink of oblivion. Beowulf had been dying long before the fire came. It had slipped from the tongues of men, fallen silent in the halls where it was once sung. It lay forgotten, buried in dust, waiting in the dark while the world moved on without it. Pages yellowed. Ink faded. Time had no mercy. The manuscript should have been lost forever. But fate is not so easily tamed. There were hands that refused to let it slip into nothingness, hands that pulled it from the embers, that traced its wounded letters, that refused to let the silence win. The scorched edges bore witness to what had nearly happened, but they were not enough to erase it completely. Someone still listened. Someone still cared. Centuries passed, and the poem lingered like a whisper on the edge of oblivion, half forgotten, barely breathing. Then came those who would not let it fade. Scholars with ink-stained fingers and eyes that burned with obsession, men who saw the ghost of something greater in those brittle pages. Grymer Johnson Thorklin was the first to drag Beowulf into the modern world. He believed he was saving history, believed he was bringing a treasure into the light. He made copies, traced every word, preserved it before time could finish what the fire had started. But he did not hear its true voice. He saw only an artifact, something to be catalogued, studied, dissected. Then came others. They read it not as a relic, but as something alive. They felt the weight of its words, the pulse beneath the ink. They saw the ghosts lurking between the lines, the echo of swords clashing, the weight of doomed fate pressing against every verse. J.R.R. Tolkien was one of them. He did not merely read Beowulf, he listened. He let it sink into his bones, let it shape the worlds he would one day create. He understood that this was not just a poem. This was something older, something primal. It was grief and fire and courage and death, all wrapped in the heavy cadence of a dying language. He lifted it from its forgotten grave and held it to the light. And still, Beowulf refuses to die. It carries the scars of near annihilation, bears the wounds of time, but it stands. The fire tried to take it. Silence tried to swallow it. But it survived. And as long as there are those who hear its voice, as long as there are those who still shudder at the sound of Grendel's footsteps in the night, it will never truly be lost. The fire in the great hall flickered and swayed, casting long shadows against the wooden walls. The air was thick with smoke, the scent of mead, the weight of something unseen, something ancient. A hush settled over the warriors, the clinking of metal and murmured boasts fading into silence. A single voice rose. Deep, measured, powerful. The Scop stood before them, his presence commanding, his words heavier than steel. He did not simply speak, he conjured. He reached into the depths of memory, into the abyss where the old gods still lurked, and he pulled forth something that had no beginning and no end. The tale of Beowulf lived on his tongue, in the cadence of his voice, in the firelit eyes of those who listened. The words were not his alone. They had passed through countless lips before him, shaped by each voice, altered by time, but never broken. They were carried like a torch through the darkness, burning in the minds of those who refused to let them die. The warriors leaned in, their breath slow, their fingers tightening around their drinking horns. The Scop told of Grendel, the cursed creature that came in the night, slaughtering without mercy. He told of the Danes, trapped in the grip of terror, and of the hero who would face the beast without fear. The hall pulsed with something unspoken, a presence, a force, an understanding that this was more than a story. This was memory. This was truth. The Scop's voice rose and fell, like the crashing of waves against jagged cliffs. The rhythm of the words matched the rhythm of the heart, an unbreakable beat, a march toward destiny. Every syllable was a weapon, every pause a moment of unbearable suspense. The warriors could see it, the shadow of Grendel slithering through the mist, the gleam of Beowulf's blade, the silent breath before the strike. They had never seen these things, never stood in that distant hall, never felt the monster's breath against their skin, but they knew. Because the words made it real. The Scop was more than a poet. He was the keeper of time, the guardian of the past. Without him, history would wither, stories would turn to dust, heroes would be forgotten. The written word was weak, vulnerable, prone to fire, to decay, to being lost in the abyss of ages. But the voice was eternal. It carried through storms, through war, through the long, unyielding march of time. And so, Beowulf survived. Not on brittle parchment, not trapped in ink, but in the mouths of men, in the breath of those who refused to let silence claim it. It was more than legend. It was a heartbeat. A battle cry. An echo of something too powerful to die. The night was thick, suffocating. A silence so profound it pressed against the skin, cold and cloying. Then, a ripple, a disturbance in the darkness. Something moved. Not seen, but felt. A shift in the air, a whisper of breath too heavy, too unnatural. The warriors in Hero did not sleep. They lay stiff, their fingers curled around their weapons, their ears straining for the sound they knew would come. It always came. A low growl, guttural, rolling through the mead hall like distant thunder. A scrape of claws against the earth. The slow, deliberate step of something that did not belong to this world, something twisted by rage, by exile, by the cruel hand of fate. Then the door buckled, splintered, shattered beneath an unimaginable force. And Grendel entered. A nightmare given flesh. The warriors had faced men in battle. They had stood against sharpened steel, had heard the cries of the dying, had seen blood stain the ground. But this was different. This was terror made real, a creature that did not fight with honor, that did not take prisoners. It killed because it could. It killed because the very existence of men enraged it. The medieval mind knew this fear. It had no name for it, no understanding beyond the cold, instinctual dread that prickled up the spine and turned the stomach to ice. The world was dark, cruel, merciless. Beyond the flickering firelight, there was nothing but the unknown. And in that unknown, there were monsters. Grendel. His mother. The dragon. They were not mere creatures of the imagination. They were something far worse. They were truths. The truth that darkness always watches. The truth that safety is an illusion. The truth that one day, something will come that no sword, no shield, no strength of man can stop. The medieval world had seen monsters walk before. The plague, creeping through villages, invisible, merciless, striking without warning. The famine, hollowing men into ghosts, twisting the bodies of children into something unrecognizable. The invaders, the unknown men from distant lands, bringing death and ruin. Monsters were real. And they did not always have claws. But there was always a lesson buried within the horror. A warning. A test. The monsters of Beowulf were not just things to be slain. They were echoes of something deeper, something older. Grendel, the outcast, the cursed, the embodiment of wrath. He was the warning of unchecked hatred, of the rage that festers in the shadows, growing stronger in isolation. He was the consequence of rejection, of cruelty, of a world that does not welcome all. His mother, the force of vengeance, relentless and cold. She was grief-given form, a reminder that every action has a price, that blood spilled will always call for more. The dragon, ancient, patient, coiled around its hoard of gold, its fire consuming all who dared to approach. It was greed. It was power left to rot. It was the inevitable fate of all things that seek to own instead of protect. They were warnings, whispered through the centuries. They were lessons, wrapped in horror. And yet, the men of that age did not turn away from them. They listened. They told the stories, over and over, each telling heavier than the last. Because monsters did not vanish when ignored. They grew stronger. Only in the telling, in the facing, in the fighting, did they stand a chance. The air is thick with sweat and mead, the scent of burning tallow clinging to the wooden beams of hero. Voices rise, a tide of warriors speaking of victories, of glories carved into bone and steel. But beneath their laughter, something lingers. A silence that does not belong. A shadow where no man stands. Then, a sound. Faint. Distant. A tremor in the earth, like the exhale of something waiting. The hall doors are thick, iron-bound, yet they shudder, bending under a force unseen. The torches flicker, their flames twisting, uncertain. Something is out there. Something old. Something hungry. And Beowulf rises. This is his first battle, the moment when the fire of youth burns at its brightest. There is no hesitation in his steps, no fear in his grip. The world is simple. There is the beast, and there is the man who must kill it. The breath of the hall is held as he steps forward, casting aside his sword, his shield. He will face this thing not as a coward clad in steel, but as a warrior, flesh against flesh. Grendel comes, not with the slow, creeping dread of a lurking shadow, but in an explosion of terror. The doors shatter. The stench of death floods the room. Clawed hands lash forward, and in an instant, there is chaos. Men scream. Bones crack. Blood spatters the stone. But Beowulf does not falter. He grips the monster, bare hands against rotting flesh, and the hall trembles beneath their struggle. It is a battle of strength, of raw will, of proving oneself to the world. The boy who entered the hall is gone. And when the beast's arm is torn free, when it howls and stumbles into the night, bleeding, broken, defeated, Beowulf stands victorious. But victory is never the end. The second battle is waiting. There is no laughter now, no roaring feast to greet him. Only the weight of what has been done. The morning brings not triumph, but reckoning. The mother has come, and she does not howl. She does not rage. She does not announce her arrival with shattered doors and bellowed threats. She takes one man, pulled from his bed, dragged into the dark. There is no warning, no time to act, only the cold realization that the battle is not won. Beowulf does not charge this time. He does not stand before the hall, daring the creature to strike. He must go to her. He must leave the safety of the world he knows, stepping down into the blackness beneath the lake, where the water is thick with blood, and the air is lost to silence. This is not the fight of youth. This is something colder, crueler. He is no longer proving himself, he is surviving. The lair is waiting, the water closing over his head as he sinks, deeper, deeper. The glow of the surface fades. The world above does not exist anymore. Only the darkness. And then, she is there. The mother. A shape in the abyss, shifting, waiting. There is no mindless rage in her, no reckless hunger. Only the weight of vengeance, the patience of something that has lived long enough to know that pain does not fade. The fight is unlike the last. His strength means nothing here. He is too slow, too human. She drags him down, his blows landing without force, his lungs burning, his vision blurring. Death is not a possibility, it is a certainty. But then his hand finds the hilt. Not his sword, but something older, something made for this moment. A blade crafted for monsters, resting in the darkness, waiting for the man who dares to reach for it. One strike. The water shudders. The cavern trembles. And she falls. There is no celebration when he returns. No roaring hall. No feast to drown out the weight in his bones. There is only the slow march back, the knowledge that this was not the end. Because the end is always coming. Years pass, and the fire of youth cools into the embers of time. The hands that once gripped a monster's throat now shake beneath the weight of a sword. The body that once tore a beast apart with nothing but strength now aches with age. But duty does not care for time. And neither do dragons. The ground rumbles once more, but this time it is not the footstep of something lurking in the dark. It is the awakening of something that never forgot. Flames rise, licking the sky, devouring homes, turning wood and flesh to ash. There is no choice now. No glory. No proving himself. There is only the fight. Beowulf does not hesitate. He knows this is his last battle. The cave is suffocating, the heat wrapping around him, curling into his lungs. His sword is heavy. His breath is ragged. But still, he stands. Still, he moves forward. The dragon does not rage. It does not lash out blindly like the beast of his youth. It waits. Watches. And when it strikes, it does so with the patience of time itself. Beowulf falls. The sword shatters. The shield crumbles. His body is failing him, the weight of years pressing down, the price of every battle before now coming due. But he does not surrender. The final strike does not come from his hands alone. A younger warrior stands beside him, untested, unsure, but willing. And together, they bring the beast down. The fire dies. The dragon crumbles. And so does Beowulf. The boy who once stood in a golden hall, brimming with strength, is now a man laid low by time. There is no fear in his eyes. Only the quiet knowing that this was always the way it would end. His story does not finish with a feast, with songs sung of his triumph. It ends with the fading of breath, the final gaze toward a sky he will never see again. The first battle was youth, wild and reckless, burning with the need to prove itself. The second was maturity, measured and cold, fought not for glory but because it had to be done. And the last was death. Not a failure. Not a loss. But the inevitable. The end that comes for all men, even those who stood against monsters. The sword slips from his fingers. The fire is gone. And the world moves on. The scratching comes at night. At first, it is faint, barely there, a whisper of sound against the silence. But then it grows. Something drags its nails against the walls, slow and deliberate, testing the boundaries between what is outside and what is safe. You tell yourself it's nothing. The wind. A loose branch. The old bones of the house settling in the dark. But then it moves. It shifts. And now it's beneath the floorboards. Your breath catches. The weight of something unseen presses against your chest. You are not alone. This is what it means to fear the monster. And yet, we never stop calling them to us. We have whispered their names for centuries, woven them into our stories, built them into the very fabric of what it means to be human. We tell ourselves they belong to the past, that Beowulf's world of shadowed halls and howling beasts is nothing more than dust and legend. But the scratching never stopped. The monsters never left. They have only changed. Grendel lurks in every dark place, waiting, seething. His mother, that vengeful whisper in the black, still watches from beneath the surface. The dragon waits for the careless thief to reach too far, to wake the fire sleeping beneath the earth. These creatures are not relics. They are not ghosts of a forgotten age. They are the quiet terrors that have always been with us, shifting their shapes, hiding in new forms, but never truly gone. Grendel was never just a beast. He was something more, something worse. He was the thing that did not belong, the creature that watched from the edges of the firelight, bitter, hungry, furious at a world that would never welcome him. He was cast out, a child of darkness staring into the warmth of a golden hall he would never enter. And so, he hated. How many times have we seen his shadow in the corners of our own world? In the eyes of the outcast, in the clenched fists of the rejected, in the quiet, gnawing rage of the ones who do not fit. Grendel was a monster, yes. But he was also a warning. A reminder that to push something into the dark, to deny it a place among us, is to feed the very thing we fear. And so Beowulf comes. He is the hero, the warrior, the one who stands when others cower. But he does not fight from a distance, does not strike from the safety of steel. He meets Grendel with his own hands, with raw strength, with the sheer force of his will. He does not fear the beast, he grapples with it, tearing it from the shadows, forcing it into the light. It is a brutal, merciless fight, but it is not just about killing the creature. It is about facing it. Because to defeat a monster, you must first see it. You must be willing to stand in its presence, to feel its breath against your skin, to acknowledge the darkness before you can strike it down. And yet, Beowulf's story is not one of simple victory. Grendel dies, but the horror does not end. His mother rises, the grief-stricken force of something far older, far more relentless. She does not storm the hall as her son did. She takes, swiftly, silently, striking where the wound will bleed longest. This is not the fury of a monster, it is the vengeance of something that has lost. Beowulf must descend. Must leave the world of men behind, must step beneath the surface, into the depths where the water strangles the light. And this fight, it is not the same. This is not youth clashing against brute force. This is something colder. He must not only fight but survive. It is the battle of those who have already seen too much, who know what waits in the dark but step forward anyway. It is the war that does not bring glory, that does not end with roaring halls and feasting men. It is duty. It is sacrifice. It is the weight of knowing that the monsters will always return. And in the end, they do. Time is the enemy no man can conquer. The strength that once tore Grendel's limb from its socket withers. The hands that gripped steel with unshakable force now tremble. The fire that burned bright in the eyes of the hero flickers, fading into something softer, something tired. And then, the dragon. It is not personal. Not vengeful. Not a creature of anger or loss. It simply is. Its fire does not rage against a single man. It consumes. Cities, homes, histories, all reduced to ash in the breath of something that does not care for the lives it ends. Beowulf fights, because he must. Because it is him, because there is no one else. And he wins. But victory is not what it was before. There is no hall to return to. No feast to welcome him. There is only the weight of his body failing, the sting of the wound that will not heal. He has killed the dragon. But the dragon has killed him, too. And the world moves on. So why does it still matter? Why do we still whisper the names of these creatures? Why does the scratching at the walls still send a shiver through our bones? Because the monsters never left. We still stand in our golden halls, pretending the darkness cannot reach us. We still cast out the ones who do not belong, still refuse to see the things lurking just beyond the firelight. We still fear what we do not understand, still let that fear fester until it rises, clawing at our doors. We still need Beowulf. Not because he is perfect. Not because he is invincible. But because he fights. He does not look away. He does not pretend the beasts are not there. He does not sit safely behind his walls, hoping the scratching will stop. He steps forward. And that is what matters. Because the monsters are still here. And someone must face them.